Today we're going to talk about subtracting decimals with number lines. So I want you to go ahead and write this title in your table of contents. Be sure to include the date and the objective. The objective is NBT 7. Be sure to include the date and the objective in your table of contents. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the first page we're going to take a look at, and it's kind of going to be a little difficult to see, but you should have this page from your binder. We start off with the problem 3 3/10 minus 0 7/10. Now, we've done subtracting with base 10 grids where we shaded in what we had and we took away what we needed to take away, but we're going to look at how to do it with a number line. And if you can see on the end of this number line, trying to put it under the camera so that you can see, they end with 3 3/10. Okay. Now you might ask yourself, why would we end with 3 3/10? Well, if my total to start with is 3 3/10 and I have to take away numbers, then that means I'm going to be working backwards from 3 3/10. So when I'm doing a number line to subtract, I should always, in essence, end with the number that I started with in my equation, because I'm going to have to work backwards from that number. Okay, so I'm ending my number line with whatever number I'm starting my equation with, so I can work backwards and subtract from that number. Okay, now in order to determine, because I don't have any other numbers laid out, so in order to determine what to count by on my number line, I need to look at what I'm subtracting. I'm supposed to be subtracting 7/10. So if I'm subtracting in tenths, then it makes sense to make my number line go in tenths. So if I start here on my number line, let's say I want to start with, 0, obviously at the very beginning, but I want to start with, I want to start counting by tenths, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my end number down here, 3 3/10, and I'm going to count backwards by tenths. So 3 2/10, 3 1/10, 3 0/10, 2 9/10. If that's confusing to you, think about it like 30, then we go to 29, okay, with a decimal in between it, okay. 2 8/10, 2 7/10, 2 6/10, 2 5/10, 2 4/10, 2 3/10, 2 2/10, 2 1/10, 2 0/10, 1 9/10, 1 8/10, 1 7/10, 1 6/10, 1 5/10, 1 4/10, 1 3/10, 1 2/10, 1 1/10, 0, or excuse me, 1 0/10, 0 9/10, and then 0 8/10. That's as far as I could get on this particular number line, counting by tenths. Now I'm starting, my problem started with 3 3/10, so I'm going to work backwards from 3 3/10, or take away from that on my number line, or go back on my number line 7/10. Okay, I'm going to go back 7/10. Since my number line counts 1/10 at a time, then I can count, this is 1/10 back, 2/10 back, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10. When I take 7/10 away, I end at 2 6/10. So I'm going to put my answer here, 2 6/10. Okay. We're going to do another one of these problems together, and then you're going to do a few on your own. Okay. We're going to look at a little bit of one of the, I guess, kind of tougher ones. 0 87/100 minus 13/100. Okay. So here I have 0 87/100. I have it at the end because that's how much I start with, and I have to work backwards since I'm subtracting. So 0 87/100 minus 13/100. Since I'm subtracting by hundredths, it would make sense to count by hundredths on my number line. So 0 and 87 hundredths, then comes 0 and 86 hundredths, 0 and 85 hundredths, 0 and 84 hundredths, 0 and 83 hundredths, 0 and 82 hundredths, 0 and 81 hundredths, 0 and 80 hundredths, 0 and 79 hundredths, 0 and 78 hundredths, 0 and 77 hundredths, 0 and 76 hundredths, 0 and 75 hundredths, 0 and 74 hundredths, 0 and 73 hundredths, 0 and 72 hundredths, 0 and 71 hundredths, 0 and 70 hundredths, 0 and 69 hundredths, 0 and 68 hundredths, 0 and 67 hundredths, 0 and 66 hundredths, 0 and 65 hundredths, 0 and 64 hundredths, 0 and 63 hundredths, and then 0 and 62 hundredths is where I can end on this particular number line. Now I'm taking away 13 hundredths. Since my line number line counts by hundredths, then I can go back 13 loops because that'll be 13 hundredths I'm going back. So here's 1 hundredth, 2 hundredths, 3 hundredths, 4 hundredths, 5 hundredths, 6 hundredths, 7 hundredths, 8 hundredths, 9 hundredths, 10 hundredths, 11 hundredths, 12 hundredths, 13 hundredths. When I go back 13 hundredths, I end at 0 and 74 hundredths. So my difference, or my answer, is 0 and 74 hundredths. Okay, you are going to do number 2 and number 4 on your own. Remember that your end of your number line always begins with the number that you're starting your equation with, because you have to work backwards when you're subtracting. And remember, look at what you're subtracting to determine what you're going to count backwards by. Okay, so those two you're going to solve on your own, but before you do that, we're going to take a look at one of your scenario equations that you have in your notebook or with your sheets as well. Okay, so this is scenario 1. To train for the girls running club race, Jillian needs to run 4 5/10 miles this week. So far, she has run 1 7/500 miles. How many miles does she still need to run in order to reach her goal? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do cubes. Okay, my important numbers. She has ran 1 7/500 miles so far, and she needs to run 4 5/10 miles. So I'm going to check off my C. My question is, how many miles does she still need to run in order to reach her goal? So I've underlined my question. Now I need to box my action words. Okay, she needs to run this much, and so far she has run this much. So it says, how many more miles does she still need to run, okay, to reach her goal of 4 5/10 miles. So that means if this is her goal and this is how much she's ran, I can take her goal, subtract what she's ran, and I can get how many miles she needs to finish. So I've boxed and I've evaluated. My subtraction sentence, 4 5/10 minus 1 7/500. Now, if I do an estimation, it means I'm using easy numbers, okay? I know 4 5/10 is really close to 5 wholes, okay? And I know 1 7/500 is really close to 2 wholes. So if I take 5 minus 2, I get 3. That means my answer should be close to 3. Now, when you do your assessment on subtracting decimals, this is a method you can do to really prove your work. You can use this method to prove your thinking and to even achieve a level 4 if you show an estimate and you tell me how you used your estimate. Okay, so my number line here they've laid out for me, and it ends in 4 5/10, excuse me, because that's what I'm starting with. And I know I have to count back 1 whole and 7/500. Okay, now this one's kind of tricky because I'm having to count back 1 whole. All right. Well, I kind of have to figure out what numbers they have laid out for me. I know if I go from 4 5/10 to 4 wholes, I've subtracted 5/10 at that point. I've taken away 5/10 at that point. Okay. Now, if I go back from 4 wholes to this next line right here, right beside it, okay, if I go back there, then that means that I've taken away 0 and 25 hundredths at that point. Okay, I've taken, because this number line is counting by 25 hundredths at a time. Okay, 0, 0 and 25, 0 and 50, 0 and 75, and then 1 whole. 1 and 25, 1 and 50, 1 and 75, 2 wholes. Okay, 2 and 25, 2 and 50, 2 and 75 hundredths, 3 wholes. 3 and 25 hundredths, 3 and 50 hundredths, 3 and 75 hundredths, 4 wholes. Okay, so if I know that it's counting back by 25 hundredths at a time, okay, my 25 hundredths and my 5/10 together, that makes my 75 hundredths out of the 1 whole and 75 hundredths I needed to take away. Okay, so that means if I go ahead and go back another 1 whole, then that takes care of the 1 whole that I needed to take away. So that means I end at, or excuse me, I'm sorry guys, if I go back to 2 and 50 hundredths, that means I've taken away the extra amount that I needed to take away, and my difference ends up being 2 and 50 hundredths, or 2 and 5/10, which is pretty close to 3. Okay, glue this into your notebook, and remember to complete numbers 2 and 4 here. Okay, and glue this in. My silly saying for today is, let's see what I want it to be. My favorite beach to visit is Myrtle Beach. If you can come in and tell me that tomorrow, you can earn 3 tickets.